Hello, class 4. Friday, fishy Friday here in school. One more week until we come back. We've got to get through next week working at home remotely, and then you'll be back in class with everybody else. So that should be fun. We're going to continue our work on our island. We've described the plants using expanded noun phrases. We had a go yesterday at writing relative clauses to describe the animals. Today, you're going to continue your work with relative clauses, but this time you're going to describe the inhabitants, the people who live on your island that Ros might have seen when she first woke up. If you want to go back to your worksheet on your ideas for your people, that's fine. Or if you can just make them up yourself now, or if you can remember them, even better. So it's the same steps as yesterday. So let's just, for those of you that didn't attend, do yesterday's lesson, let's have another look at it now. So let's share my screen, go back to the PowerPoint. So we're still learning to write sentences with relative clauses. So the first step to be successful is to write a main clause, and then you're going to add some extra detail. But today, because you're talking about people, you're not going to use the relative pronoun which, you're going to use the relative pronoun who. And it's still important to use these commas to separate your main clause from your subordinate clause. So we're looking at this box here today, the people who live on your island. We've done the plants, we've done the animals, we're now doing the people. So the first thing is to write a main clause about the inhabitants that Ros might have seen. So let's have a go at that. So what did she see? Let's have a look. We've got these people here, lots of different, so I'm going to go for this chap here who has got feathers ahead. So a head decoration, you might want to call it a hat. I don't know if it's technically a hat or what it is, but it's a headpiece covered with feathers. So I'm just going to write a nice simple main clause for step 1. So if we go back to our learning objective, step 1, write a main clause. That's just a sentence that makes sense on its own with no extra information or detail. For step 1, let's just write a main clause. So Ros saw or spotted or observed. Ooh, Ros observed. Let's go for that. Observed a person. Rob's observed a person, or Ros saw a person. Step 2, add some extra detail using a phrase starting with who. So we've got our main clause, Ros observed a person, full stop. We're going to add some extra information, some extra detail about the person. So depending on what you want your inhabitants to look like or be like, you can put whatever you want after it. So we've got Ros observed a person. Now some extra detail with a phrase starting with who. So Ros observed a person. We're not finished the sentence. We'll get rid of the full stop. Ros observed a person who, ellipsis, for something else to come after here. So Ros observed a person who was wearing a headpiece made out of colourful feathers. Full stop. So what we've done there, we've taken our main clause, Ros observed a person, and we've added some extra information about this person using the relative pronoun who. So Ros observed a person who was wearing a headpiece made out of colourful feathers. Your final step was to make sure you've got a comma between your main clause and your relative clause, your subordinate clause. It doesn't make sense on its own. So Ros observed a person, that's your main clause, comma, who was wearing a headpiece made out of colourful feathers. It could be anything. It could have had any kind of relative clause at the end. Who were carrying spears, who were wearing animal furs, who had braids in their hair, who were wearing grass skirts. So that's all you've got to do today is write some sentences about the people that live in your island with this relative clause on the end. So when you go to your teacher-made task today, it will look like this. Using your ideas, write some descriptive sentences about the people that Ros saw. So number 1, write a main clause. So if you need to go, oh no, I've got rid of that, I've done the wrong thing. Hold on, let me just open it here. So for your task, it will look like this. Come on, wakey computer, here it is. So write the main clause. Number 1, Ros saw a person. Done. If you want to add a front adverbial, that's great. Tell me where or when where the person was. So in the forest or on the beach. In the forest, Ros saw a person. Ros saw a unusual person. And a relative clause now at the end. So in the forest, Ros saw a person who was wearing a brightly coloured headpiece. Full stop. Last step, use a comma to separate the front adverbial. I've done, and the relative clause. Here's the relative clause at the end. So let's put a comma in. So in the forest, Ros saw an unusual person who was wearing a brightly coloured headpiece. Lovely. Let's have another go. So she might see a child. So there was a child. There was a child. Front adverbial. Where was this child? Beside a man. Beside a man, there was a child. Now, extra information using this relative clause, starting with who. Beside the man, there was a child who was carrying a spear. There's 2 sentences. Have a go at writing 5 different sentences about the people, the inhabitants of your island. Make sure, if you can, you'd have to definitely put in a relative clause at the end, starting with who. But if you can put a front adverbial in, even better. Let's see if you can get 5 sentences today.